Welcome to another episode of Top Team, a coaching discussion with Ulrike and Claudia. Today we're going to talk about how team coaches might go about preparing a session with their clients and the use of questionnaires. Let's get to it. Recently, Ulrike and I were just chatting while the Zoom recording was running and came across this really interesting discussion about how we prepare for client meetings, how we integrate learning about team coaching in particular in our brains, and what use questionnaires play in all this. So we figured it might be of value to you. So here is an excerpt of that. Sorry about the slightly shaky intro, but again, this was not a planned session. I hope you enjoy. Take care. So what has traditionally been a way for you to integrate things like this? What is one of your ways that you would approach something like that? Now, irrespective of our collaboration or anything, what would be?
Normally I connect with stuff which is just happening to me. So for example, as I think I told you before, I put the questionnaire to one of my customers, and I'm just thinking about contracting right now again with them, because obviously I thought that they are ready for team coaching and I thought we contracted, but I obviously need to recontract. And I was searching for some questions indeed I might not have asked yet. So I was running through all the questions, and there are even more questions in different books, just to get my questions up and running. And then I have a little book for in advance of each meeting, where I write tons of questions. And I think tomorrow morning, and before I go into meetings, which I have from 11 on tomorrow, I will rethink what's going to happen and then go to my own question. So in order to answer your question, I learn best if I have something I can connect it with. If I just have to go through tons of paper, my brain picks up a little bit, and sometimes I just think it's just 1%. But if I have an example where I can mingle it and put some knots into it so that there's a connection, then it's easier, and also easier later to find out whether I did my job how I should have done it. So to reflect on it, what happened. And if I read then through the questions again, I often think, well, you should have asked that. That would have been a good chance. So next time, have this in mind and try to translate, because I think to run through tons of questions is a good idea. But if there is no connection to reality, I forget them all at once. I read them and they're not there. So I need to have my own strength. I remember when these kind of questions were new to me, I was amazed what you could do with questions. But I'm not amazed any longer. I'm just, it's a kind of a reminder. And I'm glad that I have this as a reminder. So how about you?
Yeah, I think that it's important to get the reason why you're asking these questions, right? I mean, there's certain things that you want to position on this big map, right, of the context and the issues and things like that, that you want to figure out. And I very often, I don't have actually a very good memory. I don't. So for me, often I end up with some kind of a mind map or even a time map at some point, right? It has a certain sequence to it. right? So and then I would say, okay, so in these 7 questions, if I have a questionnaire, they tried to talk about this, and they looked at it under the lenses of these different facets. That's interesting ways of looking at this. And then they moved over to a different area of the map, and they talked about something else inherently and looked at that from different points of view. So and when then I see it kind of as the outline, the big topics were these 5, and this one we looked under these 7 lenses, and that one we looked under 4 lenses, and then ultimately you have this kind of structure in your head that then can guide you. If you talk to a team lead initially, or you talk to whoever about this team or about this client, then depending on the answers they give you, you ask certain questions and others you don't. Obviously, you adapt. I very rarely go rigorously through a questionnaire in one kind of fashion, but that gives me kind of the lay of the land, quite literally, right? It gives me the lay of the land, and it helps not to forget certain large things, right? So, okay, I should at least touch on these big topics. That's very often how it happens to me. And like you said before, going through that with the lens or the focus of a particular case study out of your experience or that you're preparing for really gives you a completely different focus. It really is a focus. You see it differently, and you gauge applicability based on that one particular case, and that's always a very good exercise.
It just comes into my mind that we also discussed in our groups how to prepare for a certain thing, to make plans, and then forget about the plans once reality starts. But running through questions is really the same. It's kind of a little plan, what could happen, and then imagine what might be the answers. And automatically, if you have these answers in your head, you get new ideas, because some people ask me, how do you come across so many questions? And how are you sure that in the very moment in front of the team, you don't forget them? And well, that's really the secret. You have to forget them in order to have them ready. So it helps me to have them ready in advance, but then depending on the situation, which develops nicely or not so nicely, depending on the case, just to have this curiosity in your mind. And being curious always means why and how, and then a certain style to apply, because to avoid why is key. Because once you ask this why question, people think, oh, I'm a kid again. Why didn't you fetch the bottle? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And this automatically is this nice thing in the coaching situation. And if you process a question without a why, it's still a why question, but it's a hiding one, then it's a much nicer approach. So, and this you can prepare to be aware, oops, it was a why question. This is why the atmosphere changes slightly. Just do the same question again, and just without the why. Did you have that same experience?
Yeah, great point there. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. And I would like to actually point out that I have no problem at all going into a meeting and having a booklet or something with me that I place on a table somewhere, and that I wouldn't have, if I need a moment to go look, I will just take a moment and go look, I mean, but the thing is, do you agree? Do you do the same thing? I mean, would you feel self-conscious about taking some resource with you?
I once went into a coaching with a ton of books all about coaching, and I put them on the table, and I saw the face, And I didn't say anything. I just looked at the books. And then finally, after quite a while, the person was asking, well, why the heck did you bring all these books? Great question. It's a why again. And I said, well, to be sure that I have all the answers in place, you might have to place to me. And he was so amazed by this, because he was a guy who always is too much prepared. And I just wanted to confront him with me being overly prepared with all these books and being very safe, and asking him whether this would be the right approach for coaching, to look answers up within a book. And the same thing, is it the same if you are too overly prepared in a management meeting with tons of different presentations in front of you, instead of putting away all these presentations and ask the people directly? And he developed that nicely, because he didn't like my book approach. He didn't feel nicely with a coach with books. He just thought, is she really qualified if she still has to look into all those books? And I had only coaching books with a lot of why is coaching good and blah, so really basic stuff. I just thought, well, I'm experienced enough, I can stay with my books. Let's see how that is. But to be honest with
I wouldn't go in with like, I mean, you made an interesting point, and I think he really felt the impact of your approach in that moment. So that was very most likely an excellent learning moment for him, right?
It was an intervention. It wasn't.
Yeah, it
me.
was. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
I think you meant something different, right?
Yeah, just bring one sheet of paper, or take your tablet with you if you have it. It has actually not happened to me yet that I had to refer it, but I just have it there just in case, right?
I have this always, and I put it on the table, and people can see that I wrote already stuff in it. Yeah. And once they start discussing it, I also write things down. And sometimes I use the flip chart, and sometimes I say, well, who wants to read it? Just to make it very open, because people tend not to talk and to write at the same time. And if things are really, really important, I tell them it's nice to have something in writing. And I don't feel bad to come prepared in a meeting, and that people can see that I have certain things on paper, just not to forget my ideas. And sometimes I say, well, see, I can put them away. This went completely a different way. And this is now here. That's our next meeting, and let's see what comes true. So I use my insecurity, my not knowing, and putting it on the table, because when you start a workshop, the flip chart is empty. And if you end it, all the walls are full of nice ideas. And I'm not a wisdom person who comes into the consultancy area and knowing everything. And I just have a customer of mine who expects me to be like that. And that's, I think we wanted to discuss a bit about facilitation, consultancy, coaching differences. And it's really, I'm really sorry, but it really gets on my nerves, because the role I have to play is still not clear. And I don't know what it takes to make them understand what they want, because they always ask me for plans. And I obviously need to change a few things so that to make them clear that this is not what I'm going to deliver. And I might say no tomorrow to my engagement, because they are obviously not ready.
It's not the right thing. Would you mind if, before we start discussing that, if I just bring up one point here regarding the use of questionnaires and using them as they are in a meeting or in a coaching session. This is also why I set them aside. I go in, I have the general lay of the land of where I want to go, what I want to touch on, and then I put them away. Because I really think that following things like that impacts your presence. Because instead of asking the question and truly listening and being open to explore where that goes, you wonder, it's like, oh, does that answer my question? Does that relate to the next question I want to ask, right? How are we doing time-wise on these questions and things like that? You're going to get there anyway. You're going to get the big things of clarification and knowledge and exploration that you need anyway. And being held by the structure of a questionnaire can be too rigid if you let it. I think there should be, like the Germans say, this red line, right? Der rote Faden that goes through it, and you should be aware that there's something you want to achieve. But the fact that your questionnaire asked 5 questions this way about this one thing, it is so detrimental, rather than letting the discussion go and staying with the conversation in the team at that moment and really listening in, and then picking up the clues that are happening, that are being given there. That's kind of the way that I see it. Yes, you're eventually going to go and touch on all the points anyway, but not in that rigid a fashion, because I have known coaches, not necessarily team coaches, but I have known coaches that completely structure a coaching session by a questionnaire. First 5 minutes this question, next 5 minutes this question, and there is no way to do something else and or to go over time or to follow the client where he actually needs to go. It's just being there and facilitating, in that case, this client to go through these questions. And so that is just something that I am not very fond of. I'm more of a let's stay in the moment, let's see where it goes, let's be very present, and still, of course, have the wider arcs of the conversation that you want to touch on. But I think it's always quite a dance. That's a favorite analogy of mine. It's a dance that you have to do according to the music that's playing, right? And the team sets the beat and the music, and you move in it, and you move along with it as a collaboration between you and the team, but you cannot dance a tango when they are dancing waltz. It just doesn't work. So
and it depends also how much space there is in the ballroom. So if it's really tight, then you need to have different set of questions in your head. And if you trigger with one of your questions a certain thing, and the whole ballroom dances somewhere else because of your question, how can I then go back to my original questionnaire and say, well, actually at this minute I need to ask these questions? There's no connection then between the ballroom and my single dance. I change the dance out of a sudden, and the whole ballroom is still busy with the waltz. Yeah. So I think a questionnaire is fine, but I'd rather use a questionnaire to have them fill it out on their own and then discuss about the results with another set of questions. But the questions I have in the meeting, for example, with you or with somebody else, they're always flexible and they're all in my head somewhere. And it's not it's not a miracle. It's sitting there in anybody's head. I mean, children ask questions all the time. And I think if you are listening to yourself, you have always enough questions to ask. And therefore, preparation is good. Reading question is fantastic because there are new ideas. also exchanging questions or listening to you. If you would be doing coaching and I would be invited to listen to you, you might have a different style for sure. And for me, it's another idea how to develop something, because I would have gone perhaps a different path and with a different result, but it's also different. So we had in our last practicum we discussed the same about moderation, facilitation, and what should be done with this little case study. And Irina said, well, I could ask this case study to be discussed by 1,000 different coaches, and I'm sure I would get 1,000 different answers how to approach this very case, which means there's no bad or good. It's just a way which suits the customer at that very moment. Yeah, and I think in the past, in the background, you always can say, well, I could have done it differently. Yes, all the time, but you didn't, and just go with it, because this is life. Life always is different.
Yeah, not better or worse, but different. And that's actually also one of the reasons why co-coaching can be such a rich experience for the coaches, but also for the team, right? Because there's different ways of approaching. We collaborate in the preparation, in the meeting, in the debrief, right? So it's a much bigger thing, because the co-coach picks up on different cues of the team dynamic than the other coach, for instance, also based on experience and just a personal makeup, actually. Okay, fabulous. So we discussed beautifully here about preparation and the use of questionnaires. So I think that was awesome. Thank you, Ulrike. Good exchange.
You're welcome. Thank you, Claudia, for exchanging again.